Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Let's try and invite Aaron Shure. Let's see if we can find Aaron, who has to be going. Thanks everybody for watching. Here we go. If Aaron is able to join, I just was talking to Aaron, we will discuss all of these episodes that he did. But really, the main episode that he did that we're going to talk about this time is called 10th Anniversary. And it is the episode where we find out that Ray has erased his wedding tape with a football game. And I'll let Aaron tell you all of the details of it. Let's see. So Aaron was a stand-up comedian who I met years ago. And let me just check in with him. And thanks everybody for following the channel, for watching this live. This is the first, and hopefully we'll interview everybody that was involved with the show and try and find out details that I can't answer myself, even though I was there from the beginning of the series to the end of the series. There are certain things that I don't know about, and actually the viewers, the fans who watch the shows over and over again, which is great, they know a lot more about what was in the finished product than a lot of the writers, because we would write it, we would watch it, we would edit it, and then we would not watch it again for a while. So it's a pleasure when we watch these reruns, and the jokes are almost new to us depending on how much of our memory we have. So let's see if, let me just see. So Aaron and I were just talking on Zoom with all of the Raymond writers, because we still are in touch and we still try and talk to each other as often as possible, but as I'm sure, it's hard to stay in touch when you have so many things going on. But it's a pretty tight group of about 7 core writers. All right, I see Aaron has joined. So let's see. Okay. All right, we are waiting for Aaron Shure connecting.
Hey,
Hello, Aaron.
good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Just like a second ago.
Yes, I was just filling them in a little bit, and I have. By the way, I have a headset in just so I can. Hopefully, you can hear me a little bit better. But you sound great, Aaron, and you look great.
Likewise.
So, Aaron, because ideally, you'd be willing to come on again, and I know you're very busy, and I appreciate you joining us. This is Everybody Loves Raymond 360. It's an Instagram site that I run, which is basically all of the photos. As you know, I took many photos during the run of the show. And I just post a lot of the photos and try and share stories of the photos or behind the scenes. And there's a lot of things that I don't remember from the show, or you're not involved in. And I was just saying how, as the writer, you work very hard on the script, and we can get into the details about it, but you work very hard. You see it in editing, you see it being played in front of a live audience, and then you might watch it when it airs, but you might never see it again.
Right.
And so, unlike fans who are watching the show, which is great, and watching it over and over again, which is even better, we are kind of remembering, for this.
I really like that you're preparing people for the fact that I'm not going to remember anything. But it's a little bit like the difference between building a house and living in it, right? I was thinking about this because when you're on a show, you pitch all these ideas, and you had to think of all those. And then of those ideas, only a few of them are even considered. And then of those that are even considered, only a few of them actually get made. And then there's many versions of it. So you go through so many versions of any episode, and it's hard to remember what really happened. But if you remember, we would get the opportunity before, when the audience would be in. Remember, we had audiences. It was so amazing, a room full of people.
Yes.
And the audience, hundreds of people would be in the stands. And before their taping, we would show the previous episode. So what an opportunity that was to hear or watch people watch your episode and see how they react. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we should go back even. We'll go back a little bit, but what I'm finding, a lot of people, and thank you everybody for your comments. I'm not ignoring the comments, and I appreciate everybody watching. It is, Aaron, maybe you have better eyes than I do, but if you see
Yeah.
any, if
Yeah,
you,
my eyes are better than yours. See?
if you catch any questions, go ahead. But the show, what I'm finding when I put up these photos is people are surprised how much work is involved and how much precision and how much effort to get the show to exactly where it is. Now, the experience on Loves Raymond was a very specific experience. And even though shows work in a similar way, Friends, Frasier, right? A lot depends on the showrunner and how they run the show. So for you and I, we were writers on the show. There was a writer's room. And the way things would happen with Phil Rosenthal writing the show is you would come in with real life stories basically and say, here's the thing that happened to me. Can we make that into an episode? And a lot of times you would just be sharing, this terrible thing happened to me. And then you would tell it in the writer's room. And then all the writers, so you're just venting, not even saying, I'm going to pitch the story. And then you get, Phil would be like, oh, that's a story. And sometimes you would go in thinking it's a story, and other times because it became kind of like a therapy group, because you would,
sometimes you'd come in, you go, well, the thing that my spouse did was so ridiculous. And they're like, no, actually, you're the ridiculous one. And their version of the story is the one we're going to tell,
Yeah. Well, actually, because we're going to get to the wedding episode, but there were times, and a very good example is the Canover episode. And this is also another little fact. We know the shows from their titles, right? And a lot of the public doesn't necessarily know from the title, because I don't know the titles of I Love Lucy episode. I don't know their internal title. And like Friends had a naming, they had a naming protocol, which was the one with the race car bed in it, the one with this, and ours just, you would think of the title that went. And some of them I look at, I go, I don't know what Blabbermouth is about.
It's funny, Marianne Luongo is saying the suitcase episode is hilarious. It's like, oh yeah, well, Tucker couldn't make it today, so you're stuck with it.
So
no, it's a great episode.
Yeah, Aaron's talking about Tucker Cawley, who we will get on at some point. He wrote the baggage episode, the luggage episode, and that was based on a real life story that he had as well. So Aaron, let's just take them really quickly. The way you would pitch story ideas, you would go into the writer's room, you tell this idea, and maybe it was a real life story, or maybe you went in and said, I have an idea for a show. And you and I wrote together the Young Girl episode, and we wrote the Breakup Tape episode together. The Breakup Tape episode is the one that Ray submitted to win his only Emmy for acting, right? And that was also based on a real life story that happened to you. So in the way that a show is made is you pitch this story, and Phil says, I think this could be a story. And then you go out and you work on a 2-page outline of what that story could be.
By the way, Boozy 620 saw the actual Raymond exterior house. I'm just reading it.
Oh, out in Long Island.
Yeah.
I like that. And their name is Boozy, which is good.
Yeah.
Unless you're mispronouncing it. Yeah.
I'm probably.
Yeah. Now, by the way, that's a funny fact too. I would say 90% of the people that worked on the show, the 135 people that worked on Everybody Loves Raymond, would have no clue where that house is.
Right.
Because that was an exterior that you shot. And Aaron, just before we continue on the writing process,
I don't remember how I wrote anything.
Yes. What happened in real life at least.
We used to talk about how the interior of the house didn't match the exterior. We like that. Yes.
That was a logistics problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I was going to say is, even for us who works on the show, now the show filmed the first year at Hollywood Center Studios, and then the rest of the time at Warner Brothers, right a few stages down from Friends. So even we on the inside, when you're watching the show, it feels so like it's in New York. And when I would watch All in the Family, I guarantee you it was filmed in Queens. Well, it was filmed at Television City in Hollywood. And when I saw pictures of Archie Bunker's character and all of the real actors outside of the soundstage in Hollywood on a sunny, bright day, even being in the business, you're like, what a great job of selling you that they're in New York. So with Ray's family, and how you feel like they're in Long Island.
Yep.
It's a very showbiz, It's a very convincing thing. Let's get back to the wedding.
We're gonna go. Are we gonna go through the? You were gonna go step us through the whole writing process. Last I heard, I was out on outline. I
Right.
think I
Well,
was working outline.
you came in with an idea, and Phil says, "Let's do." But I think we should. I'm going to race through this process because writing is boring. To hear about writing is boring. So basically, you would write a 2-page outline of what happens in every scene, and then Phil would look at it and go, "Okay, maybe this, and then you would tweak it and then bring it into what's known as the writer's room. And so all of the writers would read that outline and have notes for Aaron on his story. Now, it's a very collaborative process, and you know that eventually they'll be in your seat. So no one's going to go, this is a stupid idea. It doesn't work. They'd go, well, maybe it's funnier if this works, or maybe it's funny if you did this. So that's the natural process. You finish a 2-page outline. It gets approved. Now, Aaron Shure goes on his own into his office and home and writes the script. Now, that could take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And he comes back and he gives Phil Rosenthal that script. And Phil reads through it, puts a check mark where he thinks it's funny, writes copious notes if he thinks it doesn't work in this thing. Now, Aaron Shure goes back to his office, back to his home, rewrites the script, tweaks the script, and then comes back. And if Phil says, okay, this is good enough, then you bring that into the room, into the writer's room. And now the writers take that script, they go and they read it and they come back in. And now it's, okay, anybody, big notes on Aaron's script about racing his wedding tape. And then if there's not a lot of big notes, then you just go through it. We in the writer's room go through it line by line to see if there's anything we want to change. And a lot of times people would add funnier jokes and you would feel great because you're like, oh, they just made my script much, much funnier and they're not going to really get public credit.
You know what would really hurt at that point, which has actually never happened to me, is if your script became worse. But I've never had the experience where I handed in a draft that was so good that they made it worse. It only got better from there.
Yes, you know? That's true. That is true. I've had one bigger story that I thought, I like kind of what I did better, but I'm saying that in with all deference that everything that went through the room got better. Everything.
Especially, I think in comedy, it's a little easier to tell if something's funnier, generally speaking. I mean, there's no absolute, but you can kind of tell something is funnier than something. I guess if you're writing drama, it might be a little more like my moment was more tense than that.
Yeah. So I think, I'm just trying to look at some questions here. I think, Aaron, you bring up a very good point. There is no debate in comedy. There's something called a table read that you have, which is the first time you're hearing the script read out loud. Either a joke gets a laugh or it doesn't. So there's no debate. Unlike drama, which you just brought up, you can be like, well, I think that's a very heartfelt moment and it'll build to this moment. And so if you're doing a comedy and you have a line that's supposed to get a laugh and it doesn't get a laugh, there is no debate. That's what I'm saying.
No,
the audience
not
decides.
Usually. The audience. Although there is a little bit of a difference between how things play on a stage full of hundreds of people and then how they play at home when you're just watching.
Yes.
Marianne Luongo wants to know what's a good gift for a writer, a computer program or free write. I don't know what free write is. She wants to get a birthday gift.
What about a whiskey delivery system?
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting thing. A good gift for a writer. What do you think?
I mean, I would always take a computer if that's on the table.
But
who would not want a computer?
Price range? What is the price range we're talking about? Because yes, a computer would be great, or a pencil. Depends what kind of a writer are they too.
I know. Yeah.
You know, are they pure writers? So, Aaron, I do want to, because I know us. We're going to run out of time, and I'm asking you already to come back, even though we have at least 30 more minutes. Let's get to the wedding. What happened in your real life that led to that episode?
Okay, great. Although not Isho's account wants to know what it was like to work with Phil. Should we talk about that? Or here's the thing about, here's the story. Here's the official story of 10th anniversary. Then we can talk about Phil. Yeah. Because when we go on stage, we talk about how 10th anniversary came about. The story is that but back when I was an aspiring writer, and I wanted to study good shows. Raymond was on the air. I only became a part of the writing staff season 3, and during my first anniversary, my wife at the time, my wife and I put in our anniversary tape for first anniversary. I'm not anniversary tape, but our wedding tape to rewatch the beautiful occasion. And we put it in, and instead of seeing our wedding, what we see is an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. Because I had accidentally taped over our wedding tape with an episode of Raymond I was watching to do research. And then Phil, when I interviewed for the job, heard this story. And it's like, well, I got to hire this guy, right? And then it became an episode. And we switched it to the 10th anniversary, and we switched it from watching an episode of a beloved sitcom to Ray's sports addiction, right? And it's an episode of, he's watching football over it. So that's the origin story of that episode, right?
And well, let me just go back a little bit. You said when we're on stage. So we toured for quite a while inside the writer's room. Everybody's Raymond writers tell stories about our real life, and then we show clips of what happened. And we did it once just as a one-time thing at the Aspen Comedy Festival. Mm-hmm. And it was packed, and it was at the height of our show's, popularity. And it's an inside festival, and it was beyond packed. And so a guy said, I think I could book this show. So we had no thought of doing this show. And so we ended up doing it, and we did like 40 shows. And I'm not saying this in a bragging way, but I think we did 40 shows, and we got 38 standing ovations because writers talking about how to write is very, very boring. And so by showing the clips, by telling, and then showing the clips, and then we would do Q&A, and then we would show at the end all of the outtakes. Some of them you couldn't show on TV. Right. And so I think the audience was surprised because most of us, I'd say 60% of the room had been stand-up comedians. And when you sit in a room with people, and we've talked about this before, 9 years on Raymond, I sat in that writer's room. That's like sitting next to one person in kindergarten, and then you sit next to that person until you graduate high school. Every single day for every day of elementary school, junior high, and high school. That's how well we know these people. So it's like a very well-tuned band.
They used to say it's like doing a cross-country road trip with all the same people, but it's like a years-long road trip. But I think it's more like being like in Das Boot and being in a submarine together. So Delfson is quoting, "You got to pop the tabs out," which I actually said to my wife. I was like, we should have popped the tabs. The story has a somewhat happier ending, which is we were able to find the original footage and recover the wedding video. But then it has an even less happy ending because my wife and I are now divorced.
Oh, that's
happily divorced, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. But it came back. Oh, this is a good question. Sorry, are you reading that question? Yeah. Did the actors have a lot of input into the script? Was there any improv allowed? So that's a kind of a two-part. Ray was in the writer's room every single day and wrote many of the scripts. I think I wrote 4 or 5 with Ray. So Ray and I, wrote them together. Ray would go in and write and work in the writer's room and give his input. Any of the actors were free to give input. It wasn't like, no, you wouldn't. So if Doris Roberts said, "This feels clunky in my mouth, I can't get these words out, can we change that line?" Phil would be like, "Okay, yeah, absolutely, we'll take a look at it." Or if anything like that. But once the script was underway, so the week, it took a week to make a show. It started with a table read, and you would progressively make smaller and smaller tweaks until even show night. So it was
that's our show, right? Not all shows are that way. But
correct. Yeah. I'm saying for Raymond, we were very precise, so it was more like a play. So when you're watching a show and Doris says, maybe, that's all written. That's exactly written. The cadence, everything is written precisely. So by the time show night is happening, it's twofold. There's 2 things going on. The actors can't ad-lib the night of the show, really, if there's a line dependent that the other actor they're in the scene with is waiting for. because now all of a sudden the other actor is like, I don't know where. Wait, are you done talking? Where's my cue? And so the only exception was Ray and a bunch of the other writers. We would come up with something called a second take, which would just be a joke that Ray could insert that wouldn't screw up the other actor's timing. So it would be a standalone line that wasn't dependent on that wasn't integral to the scene and would throw somebody off.
And it was usually a Ray line, usually.
Yeah, almost always a Ray line. And I would say this: it's not that Patty Heaton or Doris or Brad weren't or Peter weren't funny and couldn't come up with anything. It was just very, very precisely written by the time we got to the end of the show.
Yes.
At the end of the taping week.
Yes, but and also to answer sort of a bit of the question, what it's like working with Phil, is he's such a good and lively performer himself that
Right.
in the writer's room, he would read the entire script back to us. He would have it on a computer screen, and we would run through it with Phil reading the lines with a really good take of each version of the line. So unlike other shows where sometimes by the time you get to the table read, you don't really know what a good read would be like, and you have to find it at that point. Phil had kind of locked it in through his own acting chops at that point.
Yes.
So we kind of knew there was a version of that line that would definitely work by the time we gave it to the actors.
And he would read it with Ray in the table the writers' room.
Too, yes.
Yeah. So you'd be in the writers' room and you would table the script in the writers' room, which meant Ray and some of us would jump in for other characters, but it was mostly Phil was reading Patty's part and Ray was reading, and so we would read the script from beginning to end. And so before you went to the table read, which is when the entire cast sits and reads the script from beginning to end in real time, by the time that happened, we were already pretty
Lily Rosenthal.
Lily Rosenthal. Who is this, Phil? Yes. Lily Rosenthal is Phil Rosenthal's daughter, who is a recent graduate of USC and grew up on the show and knows the show.
Congrats, Lily.
Yes, congratulations, Lily. All right, so I'm trying to read some questions. It's hard.
Was Patty hurt when she was thrown up against the refrigerator was a question? I forgot. What we did was we rigged the fridge a little bit, right? We lowered it.
We lowered the refrigerator, yeah.
So that Monica could get up there, right?
Brad was having problem, and this has nothing to do with Monica's weight, but Brad was having trouble. It's a very high to try and put somebody on top of a refrigerator, even though Brad is 6'8", was a challenge. So they lowered the refrigerator, so Patty was a trooper. I don't think it hurt her in any way. She would have, even if it did hurt her, she would have done it for comedy because she was so good.
You see, Lily
Monica.
Said that Monica did hurt her back.
Monica hurt her back. Oh, did she sue Phil because she's married to him? So I don't know. That would be very uncomfortable. So for those of you who don't know, Phil Rosenthal is the showrunner of the show, which means he's the head writer and runs everything. Everything is under him. And so Monica, in real life, is his wife, who was an actress. They knew each other from, they both went to Hofstra, and so they were both in the acting game. So now, Aaron, let's get back to your story with the wedding tape. You told Phil Rosenthal in your interview that you ruined your wedding tape with an episode of Loves Raymond. So he said, well, I have to hire this guy now.
He knew several things about me at that moment. One, I'm an oversharer. He could get at least one episode out of me. And three, I really like the show.
Yes. And I think hitting on oversharing, you have to in a writer's room. You're mining your personal life to do a show. So you have to let your guard down. And by the way, I am talking about Loves Raymond only because that's the show we're talking about. That's the experience we had. On Seinfeld, they didn't have a writer's room in the way that we had a writer's room. Jerry and Larry would go off on their own, and people would submit because, I asked Steve Scrovan, who we'll talk to eventually, who was on Seinfeld. And so Phil was really, really good at having this very well-oiled machine of the writer's room and trusting the writers. And the truth is, when we talked about earlier about how much work it is to do a show and how precise it is, because in these photos you see the actors, then you see all of us gathered around, and it's like, well, why is there so what is going on there? If you're going to make a really great show, it's so much work to watch everything that's going on. So you have the camera crew and you have the TD watching the camera angles and making sure nothing shakes. So we have none of that is on the table for us, is the responsibility. Right. But a lot of the times what you're seeing in those photos are the scene has been run. We've seen it now for 5 straight days. But on show night, sometimes the laughs, which are really big, would be really long. And a lot of times you would have to go, okay, so and we all went through Phil, so we didn't tell the actors directly. We did initially, but it became kind of chaos. All right, tell Peter to pause a little bit. After Doris says her line, there's such a big laugh, and just let her take that laugh, and then if he looks over at Brad and rolls his eyes and then goes back, like that's a very precise note. But that's the type of thing that, and Peter Boyle, the whole cast was so unbelievably good, and it's not that they're doing something wrong and you're like, let's go in and fix it. It's just the more eyeballs that are watching, the more they're going to notice. And when you get really precise, if someone says a line and then looks down, that feels like sadness all of a sudden that you don't want. Like there's certain things that you want to watch, and there's still, with everybody watching and everybody paying attention, still things slip through the cracks, and you're sitting there in editing going, why didn't we do this? So
mm-hmm.
Eventually
you think of a better line in editing. Like with 10th anniversary, I was on the DVD extras back when we did those. I made a joke about how when we recovered the original footage of my wedding, it just showed me hitting on a bridesmaid. And so I thought it would have been, in the real episode, as they probably know better than I do, Ray had to redo his wedding vows and forgets to come up with his wedding vows.
Right.
But it also might have been fun if they had recovered the footage and found him doing something else embarrassing. There are a couple of good questions here. Who would you want to be quarantined with? If you were any character from the show, who would you want to be quarantined with? And I've been thinking about it, and I think I would say Marie, believe it or not, because that would be some good, she would be cooking good meals.
Yes, that is true. That is true. Geez, I'm trying to think. It's funny because I know, I loved Peter. I'd love like everybody on the cast. So then the question is, are you quarantined with them as the real person or as their character?
As their character. It's got to be as their character.
Yeah, as their character.
Yeah, Robert would be. I think Robert would be fun to hang with. He's like, I'm a little bit of a mope myself, so I think I'd enjoy hanging with him.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. I would say because I would want to for all different reasons with the whole cast.
Of course.
Yeah, right. Because Deborah is such a such a strong person, and yeah, if you wanted good food, you're going with Marie.
Someone's asking about one of my other episodes, Sexwopoly, the sex game.
Yeah. So, Aaron, and this just because of time constraints. So, Aaron has written many Loves Raymond episodes, and that's why we'll name a couple. But when we're back again, Aaron, we'll get into each of those episodes. But
also a lot of questions about crossovers and reboots and what it was like shooting in Italy.
Oh, okay. So here's the thing about the reboot.
Robert's chin thing. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I love the questions. That's real. Robert's chin thing is real, right?
So Ray's brother in real life, who's a policeman, touches food to his chin, or if he's shooting a basketball, he'll touch the basketball to his chin before he throws a free throw. So that's 100% real. It's a nervous tick, whatever you want to call it. And so that was incorporated into the show.
Good writing is just stealing from real stuff.
Yeah. By the way, I'm getting a call as we speak from Lisa Helfrich, who is the line producer on Loves Raymond. I don't know what she wants, but I'll call her back, and we'll have her on the show. Which, by the way, Aaron, I want to get back to the Italy show and all that stuff. Someone asked, and I don't remember how, in the Jazz Records episode, which I wrote, Ray goes behind all the laundry and walks out with Marie's bra on his back. And I don't remember if there was someone from wardrobe back there and hooked it on him or if he did, but I'll find the answer. I saw that question. I will find out I will find out that answer. So, Aaron, just real quickly, some of the episodes you wrote, the can opener, which is phenomenal, right? You co-wrote that with Susan Van Allen, and that's it's probably my favorite. One of my favorite photos I ever took was Ray agreeing with Frank after he gives this speech to Marie. Yeah, Ray's up in the air, pumping his fist, and he gets as high as Brad Garrett. Ping Pong was your first episode. These are off the top of my head, which I'm impressed.
Yeah, you remember better than me. Ping Pong, Say Uncle. You and I wrote Young Girl.
Young Girl, breakup tape. And the sex game one. Because you and your wife had the Great American Sex Diet book or something like that, right? And you said it was a brutal game. Not.
Well, we often talk about how much were our spouses comfortable with us sharing, and Skro has a great line about how he and his wife will be fighting, and she'll see his eyes go up to the side, and she'll go, "This is not for the show." Oh, well, it could be for an episode. You get a lot of money for an episode. Okay, it's for the show. But my wife felt she wasn't too happy that I had shared that we had had a sex game. But we did. We had a sex game that she wanted to play, and of course, it ended up not being as sexy as you would like. And a fun anecdote, not a fun, but interesting anecdote about that episode is one of my favorite lines that I ever wrote was I came up with they roll the dice, and on the game it says, "Kiss your spouse as though you're about to go to war." And right after that, we shot it, and it was in the can. This is one of the only times this ever happened to me. We were actually going to go to war in Iraq, so we had to go in and change that line. And so now, if you watch closely, you can see he says war, but we went and dubbed in a trip. What did we say? A long trip?
On a long business trip or something. Something not as effective.
Something because we didn't want to bum people out. And
had you been able to end the war, Aaron, you could have saved that line.
Yes, right.
But you didn't.
Anyway, that's by the way, as you see a writer's priorities, like we're going to war, whatever. The point is, my best line is being messed with. How can this injustice happen?
Yes. By the way, Aaron, just to answer the reboot thing, which a lot of people ask about, when the show ended, Phil pitched a continuation with Monica, with Amy and Robert. And Peter's health at that point, because Peter ultimately didn't last much longer after the show, was really in sharp decline. So he did pitch the show. He did try and get traction with that, and CBS didn't want it. CBS said no to that spinoff, which I think in general, when you're watching from the quote unquote outside, and you're just enjoying the show, as most of us are, before I was writing on the show, I didn't know all the mechanics of what went on, but a lot is being factored in. A lot of it is availability of the actors. What is the time slot? What agents have deals with what people? Who does the CEO of that company? Who does Les Moonves like? Is there any personal vendettas against? There's all these mechanics.
There's also another element, which is we had all been writing on the show for a long time, and our salaries and our titles had all gone up. I think we were all executive producers or co-executive producers. And so it might have been expensive to have all those big fat cat writers come along. It would have been worth it. The show would have been another huge hit, and they made so much money on Raymond, they would have done it again.
Nice.
But that is a consideration, or was a consideration in those days.
Jay Kogan giving a thumbs up. Jay, you will be forced to talk about Marie's vision, so you will not escape this.
Jay Kogan, what a stellar resume he has. He's written on Name a Hit. It's Jay Kogan's written on it.
I Love Lucy.
Okay, maybe not that one.
No, Jay, yes. Jay will have to be to talk about, his career. But back to you, Aaron. back to your illustrious career and the reboot. So it was an initial attempt to do a reboot. So it's not like we didn't think about it. And Phil tried to do it. There is a cost factor. Multi-camera, which is what Raymond was, and All in the Family and Friends are multi-camera sitcoms, which means they're on a sound stage and there's a live audience. They fell out of favor, so they weren't as popular. And so, and a single camera example is like Sex and the City is single camera. Modern Family, right, is single camera. And so it's filmed more like a movie, and they weren't cool. So multi-cameras weren't cool. Single cameras were cool. And so there's a lot of factors going on that prevented a reboot at that point. And of course, Peter's health, not good. So now, even the talk now of, and I've talked to Ray about it and Phil about it, doing a reboot, Phil would have an interest in at least having a show where they reminisce. Show? Yeah, where they reminisce on stage, but not trying to do an actual storyline, because also, one of the twins sadly is no longer with us, and it would be tough. And also getting back to availability. Ray has done, Ray's movie career has taken off, and so he's trying to challenge himself creatively and doing a lot more away from the sitcom. Let's put it that. Why did Kevin James appear as Kevin on ELR, but Ray appeared as Ray?
I love these type of questions. It's always so. It's always hard to give that. We made some errors. We have made some continuity errors. Yeah.
No, actually, I don't know that it was an error, because here, so Kevin James, so I'll go deep, because by the way, Aaron, somebody asked when I first started this Instagram, because I thought the beauty of the Instagram, which didn't exist, when we were doing the show, is you can share all these photos, and there is an audience of people that are interested in it, versus just boring you every 2 years and going, Aaron, you want to look at pictures of Loves Raymond? I'm busy, Tom, for the next year. So in that, someone said, well, how did you get all these photos? Of course, nobody knows who we are, because we are the anonymous writers, right? There is no high profile for us. And even Phil, who, is so integral to the success of the show, most people don't know Phil still. They see it in these photos. They see this guy. Now, Phil has a show on Netflix called Somebody Feed Phil. It's a food show. And actually his third season starts, I think, May 29th. But for the most part, nobody knows the stories of what went on, behind the show, which is why I thought this Instagram thing, was great. And when people are like, well, how did you get all these photos? Well, it's because I wrote on the show. Now, that's a big preamble to Kevin James was a stand-up comedian in New York. He knew Ray. They came out they spent a lot of time during pilot season. And pilot season is when you are sitting there hoping to read for a part and getting something. Ray had gotten news radio and got fired after one day after the first table read. Kevin was reading for parts. There was a point where Ray and I, who were doing stand-up together, we moved out together from New York City, and we lived together for the first year. He didn't want to move his wife and kids out because most shows get canceled. Kevin James, for a while, that lived with us. So there was three of us in this apartment, and Peter Boyle lived upstairs. Kevin, when he was originally on the show, he wasn't Doug Heffernan. That show, King of Queens, didn't come until much later, on the show. So I think we did have a crossover where Kevin was Doug after the show started, and obviously Ray was Ray on the thing. Right. But actually, people watching would know more if Kevin was Doug.
Also, technically, if he was still Kevin on and not Doug, whoever wrote the first episode where Kevin appeared would have owned that character, right? And the creators of King of Queens actually created a new show, and they didn't want to say he's the same guy. They would have had to give up ownership of the concept.
I think they created that show and cast Kevin. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like Loves Raymond. Loves Raymond.
Oh, I didn't develop for him.
Yes, no. Loves Raymond came out of a development deal that Ray got with David Letterman to make a show based on him, and Kevin
I love that
didn't.
Story. Ray did what he thought might have been one of his last sets on David Letterman. and thought, okay, this is it. Either I'm going to get a deal or I'm not. And he waited for the phone to ring, and it didn't ring. He waited for it to ring, it didn't ring. And then finally it rang. He picked it up. This is a world in which phones ring. He picked up the phone, and it was Letterman's people, and they said, before you take any other offers, talk to us.
Yes.
Like, okay, I'll not listen to this other
no one
offer.
else is calling. Yeah, it was a Saturday. It was a Saturday, and he was standing by his kiddie pool in the back of his yard, concrete yard in Queens, in the little house that he lived in with his wife and 3 kids at that point. I like this. If you didn't point out which one Phil was, I'd have no clue. Yes. How would you? You know, and also you wouldn't know who Larry David was before he created Curb Your Enthusiasm.
But you would know Phil's laugh, because you can sure hear that on the test.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about the laughs, and the laughs are Phil and Mark Sweet. And I'll watch an episode for anybody who's watching. Eventually, I'll watch an episode and give you the exact scene where I hear Phil laugh and where I hear Mark Sweet, laugh.
Here's a question about why did the sets change. Which,
okay.
There was the first change of the sets. I wasn't there, but I know about it. Was between the pilot set and then the once you were up and shooting. They gave the show a, what did they call it? A
presentation pilot.
Presentation pilot, which they're like, you know what, we'll just shoot it and see if it goes anywhere. We're really excited about the show called Ink. That's our big hit. Just barely
and Cosby.
And so when you see in the pilot, the walls are so thin that when a door closes, they wobble because they didn't have the money to put solid doors up. And so obviously once the show was on the air, they needed a slightly firmer set, right? Did they switch the set after that? I know there was some movements of the spoon and the knife and the fork.
What happened is when they switched to high def, so the show is always made on film, okay? It's one of the last shows made on film, which is how they've been making it since I Love Lucy sitcoms. Now it's all digital. But when they went to high def, they had to put in new wallpaper. You saw the flaws. So the house needed a remodel. Now, I don't know why. I'll ask Donna Stamps, who was the set dresser, or I forget her official title, but why they switched the big fork and spoon. Because it was much bigger, and then it got smaller, the fork and spoon. Still big, but, if you look at the difference, yeah. Yes, R.I.P. Fred Willard. Fred Willard, one of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Yep.
And unbelievably funny. You would think he doesn't get it. It's hard to describe, but he never failed to deliver in the funniest way you could imagine. Mm-hmm. And that is a shame. And it's a shame also that you're surprised when somebody's nice in show business.
Yep.
It's such the exception. Aaron, we're going to wrap it up in a few minutes. Please, let's talk a few more minutes. But
Beryl Paula is right. Beryl Paula is right. That is that laugh is Phil's. Combination of Arnold Horshack from Welcome Back, Carter.
Oh, Horshack. Yeah. And to be honest, the fact that Phil's laughing at the show is very helpful because it's very contagious. And, at the beginning of the series, we had trouble getting an audience and because nobody knew the show. And then eventually we had a huge, people were clamoring to get in, but a lot of people ask, why do you film at night? And it was always to get an audience to be able to sit in those bleachers of 200 people. So, and by the way, Aaron, a lot of people will ask me, do you ever see Ray? Do you ever see, and obviously we've been friends, Ray and I have been friends for almost 30 years, so I see him very often. But the fact that all of the writers are still, for the most part, friends, we try and see each other as often as possible, but I think that came across in the show, that everybody really enjoyed each other's company, and on stage it was a very good vibe, and Ray was such a giving person, meaning Ray didn't look at a script and say, Patty Heaton has 6 more laughs than I do. That's going to change. It never happened. Ray knew the funnier they are, the better he is. The better he looks, even if he didn't get a laugh, but of course he couldn't help but get laughs. And I think I bring it up because you and I met doing stand-up comedy in like 1992 or something, or 93 in New York City. And then, and then I saw you again being interviewed in our production office. I was like, boy, that guy looks familiar. We did stand up, years ago. So
that's the world of comedy is not it's a fairly small world. I think it's gotten bigger, but yeah, it was always a small-ish world. Jake Hogan, I think, signed out, but he said, "Great job." Should we? When do we end? How long does it go?
It can go for 6 more hours, but about 4 more minutes, Aaron.
Okay.
Four more minutes.
What else should we discuss here? What other questions do we have? Crossover, Italy. Oh, we want to know about Italy. Reboot, we've discussed. I'm not
pandemic.
Sure what to say about Italy. Here's my story about Italy. Phil asked me he's like, you don't want to go to Italy, do you? And I was like, I got little kids. I want to, stick around. And then I told my wife, and she's like, you idiot, tell him yes. And then by then, and Lou Schneider got to go to Italy. So I hear it was amazing. So every time I watch the Italy episode, I'm like, oh, I could have been there. Did you go to Italy?
No, and actually, I did want to go to Italy, but I think Phil had to decide. There's a point where you can't, and I had a different dynamic because I came in as the friend of Ray. And so everybody else was a writer on Phil's hire. So there's a danger of seeming too much favoritism. And when Ray and I would go on tour for stand-up, I would have to miss a few days in the writer's room. And then, when I hosted the Late Late Show, when I guest hosted the Late Late Show, I had to miss. So there's a point where you go, okay, at some point, so I didn't go. And my only regret about not going is I obviously would have taken a lot of photos because I took 30,000 photos behind the scenes. And, Aaron, I'm going to post, I just remembered, there's a picture of you standing with Ray and your son sticking your tongues out at the camera.
Yes. I have that. Actually, I have that over here in my my trophy case. I did not clean my house, but yeah.
Oh, you have the photo?
I have the actual photo here.
Nice. And your son is now in college, so that's how long ago this photo is.
Right? Well, here is the Humanitas Award. Jen Crittenden won, and we all got because we were producers.
Oh, I didn't. So I have one of those. Wow.
You should, somewhere in your house. It's for Ray's journal. Here's a picture of young me with hair and with Ray and Patty. I'm wearing a shirt that Peter gave us. Shirt.
Peter gave us
I have other shots.
It's a good shot of your beard, too, Aaron. It's a good shot of your beard, yeah.
There we are. Phil, me, and Lou at the
Okay.
Emmys. How many times
Emmys?
did we go to the Emmys? Like 11 or 10, 9 or 10?
Well, we're only on 9 years, Aaron, so that's exaggeration.
All right. Okay. I went. Well, I've been on other shows that also went. So
we can. By the way, Aaron, we can. It's off-putting to brag about yourself, so I'll brag about you. You went on to write on The Office, on the New Adventures of Old Christine, and a couple other things. So, because we're going to run out of time, we can touch more about the difference on writing on those shows and.
Well, it was a really big difference that is worth marking. Do you remember when we were first aware of the internet on Raymond? And we go don't read those weird bulletin boards and all that MySpace chatter. It's nothing but weirdos out there, right?
Right.
And the transition from that to The Office, where on The Office we would not tweet, it was something else, but we do essentially a live stream while the show was airing. And we interacted with our fans much more immediately. And I think this has been a great transition. I love that people are so engaged. And I also love that a show like Everybody Loves Raymond has fans who are young and hip enough to do this on Instagram. And I think it's nothing but good to have that amount of interaction with your fans. So we were wrong when we thought it was a weird back alley sort of way.
It's such a part of our life, and now, I mean, the internet. And look at this. I know this sounds old school, but we're talking live. We're going around the world. There's a lot of fans in Australia that love the show. Had the internet not been taken to this,
a 30-year-old fan. That's such a good thing to hear.
Nice. Nice. Had the internet not gone this far, it would just be you and I sitting, talking over a drink and reminiscing, and people going, "Oh, the same old stories." But it's new stories, obviously, for this audience that has found, So, wow, 34 years old, and I love it. That's great. That's great. Aaron, we should figure. So, I'm going to ask now for the people who are watching. If you want, we'll do some more of these with different writers, and we'll get Ray and Patty, etc. I'm hoping this is a good time because you have to.
19-year-old King of the Hill fan. 19-year-old. Yeah, King of the Hill.
Nice. And I should say, Aaron, it was, Phil's goal was to make a timeless show. And if you have a family, and I don't know if you remember when we were making it, Friends was down the studio from us. They were stage 24, we were stage 5. Friends was such a cool show, right? It felt like such a hip show. So cool. And it was. It was amazing. And they would
walk by their stage, and the difference between their stage and our stage was like
our stage had, so their stage, you couldn't. A couple times I wandered onto the stage with friends from out of town, and I'm working on the show. I'm on the lot. There's security there for me to get on the show. I'm a producer on Raymond, all this stuff. I would take 2 steps onto the stage and be surrounded by security. Right. On Everybody's Raymond, you could wander on our stage with a machete, and they would be, "What are you looking for, Ray? Well, he's over there," And so I think the time when we did, I think the universal appeal is just that it is that time to sing. Yes, someone said, "Don't."
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, there was one time when I was afraid that we were going to be mobbed by fans. Like, I thought this is going to be like a Beatlemania moment. And it was when, I don't know if you remember this, it was in Vegas with Doris Roberts in the audience. We went to see Gladys Knight, I believe, at Vegas, and Doris was in the audience. And a lot of fans of Marie who were not young, but I was like, this is going to be, someone might get trampled. Because people were trying to get to Doris to fan on her.
Aaron, that reminds me, I'll have to try to remember. I have a photo of that moment.
Oh, really?
Yes, because we were in the theater, and Doris is a hard one to miss. Ray can walk around. Brad is 6'8", so you spot him right away. And but Doris, you couldn't, when we were in Vegas that time, she was, it was like walking with Elvis.
I'm going to die. I'm going to be trampled by boobies. It's a Jewish tidal wave of fandom, and I'm going to die this way.
And she also wore those flowered shirts.
Yes.
Yes. So it was all right. Any final thoughts, Aaron? Let's do this again.
Love to.
Yeah, I think
thank you for everybody who tuned in, and I'm so glad people are fanning on the show.
Yeah, you're showing your age by tuned in.
I know. Tune and saying fanning as though fanning. I don't know what the young people do these days, but thanks for watching the show.
Yeah, and so Aaron, we'll talk about another show. I'll put some photos up. I don't know that you showed the picture of you with Ray. Did I miss that?
With my son sticking his tongue out? Yeah.
That's all right. You don't have to get it.
Post it. Yeah.
I'll post it. Yeah. And it's been a great, thank you everybody for your comments. And I hope, if we didn't answer them, hopefully this will, it'll live forever in a post if everything has been done correctly. But if not, write your questions for Aaron. And now when you see the photos, Aaron has a beard now, so he looks a little different. But when you see the photos, you'll know who Aaron Shure is.
And I'm bald AF. Hey, AF, that's pretty good.
Oh, nice. Nice, Aaron. All right. I'm glad. Thank you, everybody, for watching. All right. I will talk to you soon, Aaron.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.